Hello, everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, my name is Ethan, and I work at a design firm in suburban Portland. My life was peaceful until I bought an old camera at a flea market in late October. The seller said it had belonged to a photographer who had disappeared years before, but I didn't believe in such stories. I just wanted to try something a little more vintage to capture sunsets in my small apartment. The first night, I pointed the lens out the window, the afternoon light reflecting off the glass, creating a quiet, almost sad scene. I took a few shots and felt satisfied. But when I reviewed the photos, I noticed a faint figure in the far corner of the photo, standing in the park across the street. I thought it was just someone walking around, so I didn't pay much attention. The next day, I continued to try to take a few more shots around the house. When I zoomed in, I saw the same figure again, with the same black coat and old hood. This time, he was standing closer, right across the street, looking straight at my apartment. My heart was pounding, but I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. Still, a cold feeling crept into my heart. I decided to delete the photo, hoping that it would all be over. That evening, I turned on some music and sat looking through old photos on my computer. When I scrolled down, a strange file appeared. It wasn't in the folder I created, but it was the exact format from my old camera. I opened it. The photo was of my own living room, taken from an angle I had never been in. In the middle of the frame, I was sitting on the sofa, looking at the screen. Behind me, through the window, stood a figure, half hidden in the darkness. I felt goosebumps rise all over my body, my hands shaking. I turned off the computer, checked the entire apartment. The door was locked. The windows were locked. No one could get in. I told myself it was probably a duplicate, something that was automatically generated by the photo processing software. But when I looked at my watch, I realized that the photo had been taken exactly 5 minutes earlier. I felt like someone was watching my every move. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound woke me up. As soon as it was light, I took the camera to the photo shop to have it checked. The technician, after looking through the data, said that every photo had the same coordinates, the same time. But the metadata showed a different device name, as if someone was sending the photos to my camera from somewhere else. He advised me to take it to the police, but I just laughed it off. How could I tell them that someone had taken a photo of me while I was home alone? That night, I decided to try again, just to prove that it was all an illusion. I put the camera on the table, pointed it at the window, turned on the timer, and went into the kitchen to make coffee. When I returned, I turned on the camera and looked at the photo I had just taken. Outside the window, the figure appeared again, this time less than a few steps from the glass. His face was still blurry, as if covered by a layer of mist, but his eyes were clearly looking straight at me. I immediately closed the curtains, my heart pounding, fear taking over my whole body. I didn't know what to do other than put the camera back in the box and shove it deep into the closet. But the fear didn't stop. That night, in my dream, I saw myself standing in the middle of a dark room, surrounded by photos of myself in each photo. The figure was getting closer and closer. When I woke up, I found the camera right on the table, even though I was sure I had locked the closet. I tried not to think about it anymore, but every time I opened my phone, I saw new photos appearing in the gallery. They were all shots from inside my house, and the man became clearer and clearer. His face gradually appeared, pale, emotionless, his eyes as deep as a black hole. Sometimes I heard a light tap on the window, but when I looked out, there was no one. I began to fear the light, the click of the camera, fear that every time I saw myself on the screen, he was looking back at me somewhere. I told this story to my best friend Mark. He laughed, saying I must have watched too many horror movies. But I sent him the most recent photo, and after a few minutes, Mark texted back that he had seen that face somewhere before. In an old newspaper article about the mysterious disappearance of a photographer in 1999, I looked it up and saw the same face, the same cold gaze. His name was Harold King, who was said to have died when he fell off a cliff during a night shoot. But his body was never found. I sat in silence for a long time. There was only one question that kept ringing in my head. If he was dead, then why did he still appear in every photo I took? After learning about Harold King, I couldn't stop thinking about that name. The story of the missing photographer seemed to stick in my mind like an inescapable obsession. I searched for all the information about him online, but all I could find were a few vague lines. Harold was a man with a strange passion for capturing moments that he believed existed between two worlds, where the soul and the human intersect in a split second. He once said in an interview that he could record the presence of the deceased with light. Then he disappeared while taking photos in a forest near a cliff. The camera was found a few months later, the body broken but the lens intact. And now, it is in my apartment. I started to feel like I was continuing Harold's unfinished work. Every time I looked at the camera, I felt like someone was looking back from the other side of the lens. One evening, I left the camera on the table and just turned it on to view the photos, not taking any photos. But among the old photos, a new one appeared. It had no name or specific time. In the photo, I was sleeping on the bed, and Harold was standing next to me, his face pale and his eyes sunken. He tilted his head, a crooked smile, as if he was observing me with satisfaction. I threw the camera hard on the ground, a feeling of fear rising. The next morning, when I woke up, the camera was still on the table, undamaged. The screen lit up, even though I was sure it hadn't been turned on. A line appeared in a dim light. Finish the last photo. I didn't understand what it meant, but my instinct told me that Harold wanted me to take more photos, that he wasn't done yet. I tried to ignore it, but every time I walked past the camera, I heard a small click as if someone was taking a picture. I opened the camera and found dozens of new photos of me walking around the room, in the kitchen, even in the bathroom. Impossible. I lived alone. I took the camera to the dump, but that night it reappeared on my desk, clean and shiny. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight. I knew I couldn't throw this thing away. Maybe I had to face it, or Harold. I decided to go to the forest where he disappeared. It was a remote place, nearly 2 hours' drive from the city. The small road leading into the forest was covered in fog, and the midday light couldn't penetrate the dense canopy of trees. I brought my camera with me, hoping that if I could capture what Harold was looking for, he would let me go. When I got there, I stopped the car and walked deeper. The wind was cold, and the sound of branches rustling against each other sounded like someone's sigh. I raised the camera to take a test shot, and immediately, the screen displayed an unusual image. In the photo, between the trees, there was a long white streak of light, fading into the silhouette of Harold, standing not far from me. I turned my head, but there was no one. When I took another shot, he moved closer, his face clearly visible, his lips moving as if he wanted to say something. I heard a whisper in my head, as if coming from the lens itself. He told me that his soul was trapped in the last frame and only the person holding the camera could free him. I stepped back, my heart pounding, but a part of me was strangely drawn in. I took another shot, the flash so strong that I had to close my eyes. When I opened them, Harold was no longer in the frame, only a black void in the middle of the forest. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it was all over. But when I reviewed the photo, I realized that my face was reflected in the lens, blurred and elongated, as if I were merging into the photo itself. Back home, I felt tired and heavy. Everything around me seemed darker, quieter. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a small streak of light on my neck, exactly like the flash from a camera. I tried to erase it, but I couldn't. The feeling of someone standing behind me kept haunting me. I opened my phone and saw a new notification. Photos had just been automatically synced from the camera. There was one in the gallery I hadn't taken. It was a picture of Harold, but this time he wasn't standing outside the window. He was in the room, right behind me, his face blurred, his eyes as black as a deep abyss. I threw my phone down and ran out of the apartment. As I ran down the stairs, I saw my reflection in the hallway mirror. Harold was walking behind me, slowly. I ran out into the street, breathing heavily, my palms sweaty. But when I looked around, I was alone in the quiet night. No one. I didn't know what was real anymore. Maybe Harold never left, and now he wants me to keep taking pictures until my soul is trapped in the lens like his once was. I returned home early in the morning, after a night of running around without stopping. The apartment was so quiet I could hear my heartbeat. I closed all the curtains, took out the battery of my camera and hid it under the wooden floor, where I thought Harold couldn't reach me. But as soon as I sat down, a flash of light came from the corner of the room. On the table, the laptop screen turned on by itself, displaying a series of new images. All of them were of me, from the same angle, from the same pose, except the silhouette behind me was getting clearer. In the last one, he was standing right behind me, his face so close that I could see the veins on his neck. I immediately closed the laptop lid, my heart pounding. I knew it couldn't be a coincidence. Something was playing with me, or trying to pull me along. Harold's words to finish the last photo echoed in my head. I wondered if that was the only way to end this nightmare at night. When the city began to quiet down, I could clearly feel the gaze from somewhere in the darkness. I turned off the lights, leaving only the dim light from the hallway. The cold space enveloped me, and then I heard footsteps on the wooden floor. Slow, steady, as if someone was walking down the hallway towards me. I didn't dare to breathe heavily, just sat still and listened. When the footsteps stopped, the wind blew gently, making the curtains flutter. And immediately after, I saw the reflection in the window frame. Harold was standing out there in the middle of the night, his face pale, his eyes deep and bottomless. I stood up, stepped back, but the reflection still did not disappear. I picked up my phone to take a picture, but the camera was faulty. The screen only showed black. I tried turning on the lights, and as soon as the light flooded in, Harold's figure disappeared. I felt relieved, but one detail made me freeze. There was still a handprint on the glass door, clearly imprinted as if it had been printed from the outside. The handprint was so cold that I touched it lightly and felt my skin turn icy. I knew he was more than just an image in the camera. He had found a way to get out. I decided to go see Mark and tell him everything. When I got to his house, I found the door unlocked. I walked in and called out, but there was no answer. Mark's phone was on the table, the photo app on. The screen showed dozens of photos. In one of them, I recognized my own face, looking back, with Harold standing next to me. I gasped, my heart pounding. When I turned around, Mark was standing in the dark, his eyes glazed over, holding my camera. He said hoarsely that Harold only wanted one more person, that he had chosen me because I dared to see him in the first photo. I snatched the camera from Mark's hand and ran out of the apartment, leaving behind a creepy laugh. When I got home, I locked the door, took out my phone battery, turned off all my devices with cameras. I thought I was safe, but that night I heard a familiar click right next to my ear. I turned around, no one was there, but in the corner of the room, a small light flickered. I walked closer and saw the camera lens was open, pointed straight at me, even though I had hidden it on the floor. On the screen, the newly taken photo appeared. In it, I was looking at myself, but behind me was Harold, his hand on my shoulder. I screamed, threw the camera against the wall, but as it fell, I heard a whisper coming from the lens. Harold's voice rang out softly, low, steady, and cold as metal. He said that I could not destroy what connected us, that every time I took a photo, he was more present. I realized I was trapped by the light itself. I tried to smash the camera, but the lens did not break, only reflecting my trembling image. From inside, Harold's eyes stared at me, seemingly smiling. Finally, I picked it up and put it in a drawer, then went outside. I walked for hours in the rain, trying to clear my head. But when I looked in the mirror of a car parked on the side of the road, I saw myself standing there, soaked, and behind me was Harold, approaching. I panicked, ran away, but everywhere there were mirrors reflecting the same image. I didn't know what was real and what was imaginary anymore. Maybe he was no longer in the camera, but right inside all the reflections around me. When I got home, I opened my laptop, intending to send an email to Mark, but saw a new message, sent from an address named Harold King, 99. The content had only one line, "Look back." I turned my head, and in the mirror opposite, I saw myself sitting in front of the screen, and Harold standing right behind. His face no longer blurry, but clear in every detail. I stood still in front of the mirror, not daring to blink. Harold was still there, clearly, standing right behind me. His face was as pale as wax, his lips twisted in a crooked smile. But what scared me most was that he was more than just a reflection. His breath was soft against the back of my neck, cold as ice. I spun around, but saw no one. When I looked back in the mirror, I was alone, sweat dripping from my forehead and my heart pounding in my chest. I fell to the floor, feeling the air in the room thicken, heavy and damp. From the corner of the room, the camera turned on, though I had never put the battery back in. The screen read, "Let him see you." I rushed over and pulled the plug, but the lights in the house flickered on and off. A strong wind blew through, making the curtains flutter. A click echoed in the darkness. I stood still. The click rang again, as if someone had taken another picture. I looked around, no one, but I had a distinct feeling that something was moving with me. I mustered up the courage to open the camera. There was a new photo in the memory. I was standing in the middle of the room, eyes closed, and behind me, Harold was leaning close to my ear, whispering something. I felt a chill down my spine, a faint musty smell permeated the room. I deleted the photo, but after a few seconds, it reappeared automatically. This time, Harold's face was closer. So close that I could see the deep black pupils like a bottomless pit. I couldn't stand it anymore. I took the camera to the old church at the end of the street, hoping to find peace. The priest there was an old man, his face gentle but his eyes filled with anxiety when he saw the thing I held in my hand. He said that there were souls that didn't want to leave, especially those who died haunted. Harold might have used the light to bind his soul, and that camera was the door between the two worlds. He advised me to burn it before it was too late. I thanked him and left, my heart heavy. It was raining as I drove home. The raindrops on the windshield sounded like 1,000 small taps, regular and unfamiliar. I turned on the radio, but instead of music, there was static and broken sounds. Amid the distortion, I heard Harold's voice, steady as if reciting a mantra. I turned the radio off, but the sound still echoed in my ears, as if coming from my own head. I tried to calm myself, but then a flash of lightning appeared outside the window, revealing Harold sitting in the back seat, his face expressionless. I slammed on the brakes, stopping the car in the middle of the road, my heart almost exploding. When I turned back, the seat was empty. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my breathing, and then drove on. When I got home, I was soaked. But it wasn't the rain that chilled me, it was the invisible presence around me. When I opened the door, the apartment was dark, but the camera's pale blue light was still on the table. I walked over, my steps heavy. The screen showed a new photo of me in the car, clearly from the back seat. It couldn't be. I remembered no one was there. I threw the camera to the floor, the sound echoing through the room. The screen flashed, then went black. I thought I was safe, but when I entered the bedroom, I saw dozens of photos scattered on the bed, all of me at different times of the day. From angles I didn't know, I collected them and burned them. But the smell, like burning hair, filled the room. Suddenly, black smoke curled from the ashes, forming into a human shape. Harold appeared, his smile stretching from ear to ear. He said I couldn't escape because he had seen me, and now I had seen him. The bond had been formed, and only one of us could survive. I ran out of the room, but the door slammed shut. Harold's shadow spilled over the wall, moving closer, each step dimming the light in the room. When he touched my shoulder, I felt the cold seep through my skin. I screamed, wrenching my hand away, but he vanished into thin air like smoke. I collapsed, gasping for breath, but when I looked up, in the mirror before me, I saw my eyes begin to darken, my gaze deepening, becoming more emotionless. Harold's voice echoed in my head one last time, whispering that he didn't want to hurt me, just wanted me to be the one to take his place, to hold the camera and continue shooting. I looked up at the mirror, seeing his smile hidden in my face. That night, I sat at the table. In front of me was the turned-off camera. I picked it up, slowly, as if controlled by an invisible force. When I pressed the button, the light flashed, and in that moment, I saw Harold disappear completely. But in the photo I had just taken, the person in the picture was not him. It was me, but with a different gaze, deep and cold like Harold's. The next morning, a faint light shone through the curtains, but I couldn't feel any warmth. The atmosphere in the house seemed to have changed. It was so quiet, it was stifling. I sat at the table, looking at the camera still lying there quietly, like a sleeping creature. I wanted to throw it away or smash it, but some part of me couldn't bring myself to do so. It was like it had become a part of me, a part I couldn't separate. I turned it on, just wanting to make sure it was over. But as soon as the screen lit up, I saw a new picture. It was me sitting in the same position, same angle, same light. The only difference was that behind me there was a door ajar, and in the darkness of that door, a pale hand was sticking out. I turned around, looking towards the hallway. The door was closed. No one was there. I felt my heart stop. I turned off the camera, pulled out the battery, and put it back in the box. But a few minutes later, the click sounded, slow, deep, and damp, as if coming from deep within. I knew the camera was working on its own. I approached, shaking as I opened the box. The lens was wide open like an eye, looking at me, reflecting my silhouette in the pale blue light. I stepped back, but the click sounded again, and a new photo appeared on the screen. In it, I was standing in the middle of the room, and behind me, the hallway door was wide open. I turned around. The door was still closed, but the cold air began to spread everywhere, thin as mist. I felt someone's breath right next to my neck. I screamed and threw the camera to the ground. When it crashed, the light in the room went out, leaving only a thick darkness. For a moment, I heard Harold's voice echo. It wasn't his voice, but a long, groaning sound like metal scraping against a wall. I looked for Mark, but since that night, I haven't been able to contact him. The phone was always busy, and when I got to the house, the door was locked from the inside. I knocked and knocked until the neighbors opened the door and looked at me strangely. They said Mark had left a few days ago. The apartment was empty. I didn't believe it, because I had just talked to him yesterday via text message. When I got back to my car, I checked my phone. The message from Mark was still there, but the sender's name was no longer Mark. Instead, it was Harold King 99. I felt like my blood was freezing. That night, I didn't dare to sleep. I sat in the living room, the dim light shining on the floor. Everything was eerily quiet. I heard the wind outside the window, the sound of water dripping from the sink, and in between all that, something like the sound of a camera working. I closed my eyes, but the image of Harold kept appearing in my mind. I remembered the priest's words, only burning it could end it. I gathered up all my courage, put the camera in the middle of the room, poured gasoline on it, and lit it. The flames rose fiercely, red and crackling. I stepped back, watching the camera melt in the bright light. But then, in the midst of the flames, I saw Harold's figure. No longer a ghost, but a real person, stepping out of the light. He reached out to touch the flames, unburned. When he stepped out completely, the room was cold. The flames went out, only black smoke rose. In front of me, Harold stood there, his face no longer pale but identical to mine, every line, every expression. I stepped back, but he took a step forward, his voice echoing as if coming from my chest. "We are one now." I fell to the floor, my head spinning. When I opened my eyes, everything was quiet again. The room had no trace of fire. The camera lay intact on the table, shiny as new. I touched it lightly, and in that moment, I saw my reflection in the lens, but my eyes were different. It wasn't me anymore, it was him. Harold was watching me from inside, waiting for me to press the shutter. I knew I'd lost. I closed my eyes, hearing the final click echo in the cold room the next morning. Neighbors said they saw a flash of light from my apartment at dawn. When the police arrived, all they found was a camera in the middle of the room, the screen displaying a picture. In it, I was standing there smiling, with a blurry figure touching my shoulder behind me. No one knew what had happened, and no one dared to keep the camera. But a few weeks later, it appeared in another second-hand store, clean and functioning, waiting for a new buyer. My story ends on that misty morning, but the camera doesn't stop. It continues to drift through many hands, through many cities, like an object looking for a successor. One winter afternoon, a man named David walked into a thrift store in the suburbs of Seattle. He was an amateur photographer, passionate about antiques. When he saw the old camera with its shiny silver case and the faint inscription Harold King, 1999, he felt strangely attracted. The salesman only said it had appeared there a few weeks ago, its origin unknown. David laughed and said he liked things with history. He didn't know that history was about to consume him. Back home, David cleaned the camera and placed it on his desk. He took a few test shots. The light was soft and somewhat vintage, as if the camera captured the soul of each moment. He looked at the first photo, saw himself standing by the window, the scene behind him blurred by the mist. But when he zoomed in, he realized there was a strange figure in the corner of the photo. Half a person, blurry but clearly a face. He thought it might just be a lighting problem, so he didn't pay much attention. That night, he put the camera on the shelf and went to sleep. The sound of rain falling steadily outside, lulling him into a gentle sleep. But in the middle of the night, he heard a soft click. David opened his eyes, looked around the room, only a faint blue light coming from the camera. He walked over, his heart beating fast. The screen was showing a new photo, taken of the same room, but from a higher angle, as if from the ceiling. In the photo, he was lying on the bed, eyes closed, and there was a figure standing at the end of the bed, leaning over him. The photo was blurry, but David felt his chest tighten. He turned off the camera, put it in the drawer, tried to go back to sleep, but he tossed and turned all night. The next morning, as the light flooded into the apartment, David opened his camera to check. The photo from last night was gone, replaced by another one. He was sitting on the sofa, eyes wide open, staring straight into the lens, although he couldn't remember taking that photo. Behind him was a window frame, where a dark figure stood still. He shivered, trying to delete the photo, but couldn't. Every time he pressed delete, the camera vibrated slightly, as if in protest. David thought it might be a software bug, so he took the camera to a repair shop. The technician looked at it, frowned, and asked why the camera was showing signs of activity at 3 a.m. when the battery was removed. David couldn't answer. That night, he tried to take a few more photos to check. But this time, each photo showed the same figure behind him, standing closer, clearer. The face was pale, the eyes were sunken, and the gaze seemed to penetrate the screen. David began to hear a whispering sound every time he took a picture, soft but clear. He tried to ignore it, but the whispers became voices, each word echoing in his head. Look closer. He zoomed in as far as he could, and realized the face was familiar. It was the same face from the last photo of Ethan, the previous owner. David, trembling, searched the internet for Ethan. Nothing but an old article about the mysterious disappearance of a man in Portland, last found in a locked apartment. The only photo left in the file was of him smiling with a dark shadow behind him. David felt a chill run down his spine. He threw the camera in the drawer and left the house. But when he returned, it was on the table, neat and clean as if it had never been touched. He heard a low laugh echoing in the room, low and steady, then it stopped. In the following days, things got worse. New photos appeared every night, even though David never turned on the camera. In the photo, Harold became clearer and clearer. His eyes seemed to stare straight into David's soul. David lost sleep. His body was emaciated. His mind gradually blurred between reality and fantasy. One night, he decided to end it all. He put the camera on the table, turned on the timer, then sat opposite. The light from the lens reflected on his face. He said softly, "If you want, come." The click sounded, and the light flashed one last time. The next morning, the police received a call from a neighbor, saying they heard someone screaming in the early morning. When they broke in, they found only an empty room. The camera on the table with the screen lit. In the photo, David was looking straight into the lens, smiling, and behind him was a figure standing still, his black eyes as deep as a bottomless pit. People searched for David forever, but could not find him. As for the camera, a few weeks later, it appeared in another store, ready to wait for the next person. Lily is a senior art student, living in a small apartment in the city center. She loves photography and often wanders around to take pictures of everyday scenes. One morning, when she stopped by the antique shop on the corner, she saw a strangely beautiful old camera. The silver metal had faded over time, but the lens still sparkled. The shop owner said that it used to belong to a famous photographer, but did not specify the name. Lily smiled and bought it right away, not knowing that in that moment, she had just opened a door that could not be closed. The first evening, Lily used the camera to take some test shots in her apartment. The yellow light reflected on the wall, creating a warm feeling. She took pictures of the corner of the room, the window frame, and then herself in the mirror. When she reviewed the photo, she laughed because the photo was blurry and slightly off-angled. But in the back left corner, there was a strange figure standing. The face was unclear. Only the shoulders and neck were in the darkness. Lily thought it was just a reflection of light, so she ignored it. That night, she heard a small click from her desk. She turned on the light, saw that the camera was on, even though she hadn't put in the battery. The screen displayed a new photo of herself sleeping. Lily shivered, ran to check, but saw no one in the room. She deleted the photo, then turned off the camera, thinking it must be a sensor error. But the next morning, when she turned it back on, the photo was still there, and in the photo, the shadowy man behind her had now moved closer, close enough to see his eyes. Lily began to feel worried. She looked up the camera, but there was no information except vague stories about the previous owner who had disappeared. She took it to school and asked the photography professor to take a look. He glanced at it, then frowned. He said that this model of camera couldn't operate without a human operator, and most of all, it couldn't have an automatic night shooting function. Lily recounted what she saw, but he just smiled faintly, thinking she was tired from studying. However, when he reviewed the memory card, he was silent for a long time. In the last photo, he saw himself standing in the classroom with a hand on his shoulder, even though he and Lily were the only ones in the room. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She heard a rattling sound coming from the cabinet, a sound like metal hitting metal. She slowly walked over, opened the door, and saw the camera inside, even though she was sure she had left it on the desk. She stepped back, her heart pounding. The click sounded, the light flashed, and when she looked back, the screen showed her own face. But the eyes in the photo were looking straight out, as if they knew she was looking at them. She screamed, throwing the camera to the floor, but the sound made every light in the house flicker. The room was cold, and Lily heard a soft, low voice, like a whistling wind. The voice whispered in her ear, so soft it was creepy. She ran out of the apartment. Rushing down the street in the rainy night, her breath was ragged. Her heart was about to burst. The next morning, when she returned, the apartment was as quiet as if nothing had happened. The camera was neatly placed on the table, clean, undamaged. She picked it up with trembling hands, intending to throw it away. But then she noticed a new photo on the screen. The photo was of her standing in this exact position, holding the camera, her eyes sunken, her face expressionless. She put the camera down, stepped back, feeling as if the floor was breathing too. She called her classmate, told him everything, but there was only silence on the other end of the line. Then suddenly, a click sounded on the phone, followed by a strange man's voice speaking very softly, almost from the other side of the lens. She hung up, tossed the phone aside. When she turned back, the camera screen was lit, displaying the faint words "Look behind." She turned slowly, and in the wardrobe mirror she saw her reflection, along with a man standing close by, his face blurred but his deep eyes staring straight at her. Lily screamed, smashed the mirror, and ran out. But before leaving the apartment, she looked back. The camera was still on, the lens pointed at her, and a soft voice rang out again. "Now it's your turn." When the police arrived, they couldn't find Lily. The apartment was empty, only the camera lying on the floor, the screen showing a new photo. In it, Lily was standing in the middle of the room, looking straight into the lens. Behind her, a blurred figure with endless black eyes. And then, as before, the camera disappeared, only to appear a few weeks later somewhere else, waiting for the next buyer. The camera appeared again, this time in a small shop in the old part of Denver. The shop owner said a stranger left it early in the morning and then disappeared. At noon, a customer named Thomas walked in, his eyes stopping right on the shiny silver camera in the glass cabinet. As a freelance photographer, Thomas often collected antique equipment to take more soulful photos. He asked the price. The owner just shook his head and said that no one wanted to keep it for too long. As long as he dared to buy it, he could take it. Thomas laughed, thinking it was just a business trick. So he paid and left. Back at the apartment, Thomas cleaned the camera, feeling the cold metal even though the room was quite warm. He inserted the battery, tried taking a few pictures around the house. The pictures came out very nice. The light was harmonious. The details were strangely sharp. But in the last picture, when he zoomed in, he noticed a blurry figure standing behind the curtain. He stopped, looked around the room, no one. When he opened the window to check, the cold wind blew in, the curtains fluttering. He smiled, telling himself he was being too suspicious. That night, Thomas sat editing photos on the computer. Every time he looked at the last photo, he felt like the figure was moving, very slightly, almost imperceptibly. He blinked, thinking he was seeing things, but when he looked again, the figure was clearer, moving closer to the lens. A cold feeling ran down his spine. He quickly turned off the computer and went to sleep. The next morning, Thomas woke up early to prepare for the outdoor photo shoot. When he turned on the camera, he saw a new photo taken while he was sleeping. The angle was high, the ceiling, and someone was standing next to the bed, looking straight at him. He gasped, his heart pounding, his mind blank. He deleted the photo, pulled out the battery, and put the camera in the drawer. But as soon as he did, a small click sounded, as if someone had just taken another photo. Thomas stepped back, his eyes glued to the drawer. The air in the room became thick, the lights flickered. He opened the drawer, the camera lit up, the screen displayed a new photo. In the photo, he was standing in his current position, still holding the drawer handle, and behind him was a blurry figure, seemingly reaching out to touch his shoulder. He threw the camera hard on the floor, but it didn't break, only making a heavy metallic sound. That night, Thomas went to see his friend Claire, who was also a photography enthusiast. He told her everything, and she just laughed, saying that he must have been too stressed. To prove it, she picked up the camera, turned on selfie mode, and took a test shot. When she looked at it again, her face crumpled. There were 3 people in the photo, her and Thomas, and another man standing behind him, tall, thin, wearing a black coat, his face blurred. Thomas felt his blood run cold, recognizing that the figure was exactly like the man in the Harold King stories he had read. Claire shook as she deleted the photo, but the camera took another one. No one touched the button dot. From that day on, Thomas began to hear whispers around him, especially when it was dark. At first it was so soft that he thought it was the wind, but it became clearer and clearer. A male voice, deep and even, repeated a single sentence: "Look into the lens." He tried to ignore it, but every time he passed a mirror or window, he saw a figure standing silently behind him, just a few steps away. One night, when he couldn't stand it anymore, Thomas put the camera on the table, turned on the video recording mode, wanting to see who was in the room. He left, leaving the camera to record. The next morning, when he reviewed the video, he saw the room quiet for the first few minutes, then the curtains moved automatically. Then, the lens began to rotate slightly, as if someone was holding it. The figure of a man walked through the frame, stopped, and looked straight at the camera. Although the image was blurry, the face was clearly visible. With a cold smile and eyes as black as a deep hole, Thomas threw the camera into his suitcase and ran straight to the nearest church. He met the priest and told him everything, but the man just looked at him silently for a long time, then said that he could not bring that thing here. He said that inside the camera there was something that did not belong to this world, and once he looked at it for too long, it would look back and pull him towards it. Thomas was scared and ran away from the church. On the way back, he saw his reflection in the car window, but he was not alone. Another face, unfamiliar and smiling faintly, was looking at him from inside. That night, the neighbors heard screams and crashing sounds in Thomas's apartment. When the police arrived, they found no one, only the camera lying in the middle of the floor, the screen showing the last photo. In it, Thomas was standing in front of the mirror, his eyes wide open, and behind him was a figure with a hand on his shoulder. A few weeks later, a Denver antique store displayed a shiny silver camera again, as if nothing had happened. The camera was sold to a Kansas City antique photo shop that specializes in collecting and restoring antique equipment. A week later, Richard, a middle-aged man who loves vintage film, walked into the shop. He used to be a photography professor, now retired, and spends most of his time restoring old photos. When he saw the silver camera lying quietly in the cabinet, he felt like something was pulling him closer. The shop owner said that the person who brought it didn't leave a name, only that it contained very special photos. Richard smiled, thinking it was an opportunity to try that night. He sat alone in a dark room, turned on the soft yellow light, and placed the camera on the table. He tried taking a few photos around the house, feeling very smooth, as if the lens was guiding him. When he reviewed it, he realized that the quality of the photos was far beyond any device of the time. But there was one detail that made him stop. In each photo, even though taken from different angles, there was still the same blurry streak, like a shadow of a person. He thought it was just a lighting error, so he continued taking photos. Late at night, when he was developing photos in the darkroom, the red light shone on the trays of reflective solutions that flickered. Suddenly, the photo in the tray moved slightly. The blurry image seemed to be breathing, then the face in it gradually appeared. It was a man with deep eyes and a blank look. Richard was startled, spilling the tray of chemicals. He blinked, and the image disappeared. He reassured himself that it was just an illusion because he was too tired. But the next morning, when he reviewed the photo, the face was still there, clearer, more vivid. He used software to blur that area, but no matter how he adjusted it, the face reappeared after a few seconds, as if it wanted to be seen. He tried deleting the file, but the file did not disappear. Only the words automatically saved appeared. At night, he heard a small clicking sound in the living room. It was as regular as a heartbeat, getting closer each time. When he turned on the light, the camera remained still, but the screen lit up, displaying the words "Take more pictures." He sighed, picked up the camera and took a picture of the opposite wall. But when he looked back, instead of the wall, he saw himself sitting at the table, his eyes empty as if he had been sucked into the frame. He felt tired and scared. He told his story to an old friend, a priest who had studied the supernatural. His friend advised him not to look at the camera anymore, because there were objects that not only kept images, but also imprisoned souls. His friend said he had heard of a photographer named Harold King, who tried to use a camera to record the souls of the dead, and eventually disappeared without a trace. Richard shuddered when he heard, because that name was also engraved on the camera body that night. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. He dreamed that he was standing in a dark room, surrounded by hundreds of photographs. Each one had the faces of different people, but their eyes were all on him. When he woke up, he found his house wall covered with photographs, stuck together as if growing out of the wall. In the middle was the largest photograph of himself, but behind him stood a silhouette, his face blurred. He panicked, ran out of the house, intending to take the camera to the nearby lake to throw it away. But when he opened the bag, the camera was gone. He returned, his heart pounding, and on the desk, the camera was there again, clean and shiny. He touched the lens lightly, and in it, his face was reflected, but his eyes were different, cold and deep like a black hole. There was a click, light but clear, and then a flash of light for a moment. The next morning, the neighbor found Richard's door wide open. He had disappeared without a trace. The police found only a wet photograph on the table of him sitting and smiling, with a strange man with dark eyes behind him. They kept the camera for investigation, but a few days later, it disappeared from the archives. No one knew how. A few months later, in another state, a small shop displayed the familiar silver camera, the lens shining like new. The seller only said one sentence: "Be careful when looking at it, because the thing inside is always looking back." My name is Daniel, a reporter for a local newspaper that specializes in writing about strange and unsolved cases. When I heard about the disappearances involving the same antique camera, I thought it would be a good topic to explore. I don't believe in the supernatural, I only believe in evidence and reason. However, when I started to investigate, things gradually became beyond my understanding. I found the address of the photo shop where Mr. Richard had bought the camera. The shop was closed. The inside was covered in thick dust, with only a few photos scattered on the floor. Among them, I found a blurry picture of a man sitting at a table with a shiny silver camera. His face was smiling, but his eyes were pitch black, without whites. I took the photo to the newspaper office's photo lab for analysis. When I enlarged it, I realized there was a shadowy figure standing behind the man in the photo, seemingly looking straight into the lens. A cold feeling ran down my spine. I thought it was an exposure error, but the more I looked, the more unusual it seemed. The figure was tall, with a long neck and an unclear face. Only 2 dark eye sockets could be seen. I tried to calm down and continued to investigate. The next day, I went to Richard's house. The house was sealed, but I asked the police for permission to review the scene. In his office, everything was intact, except that the walls were covered with black and white photos. When the light shone through the window, I realized that in each photo there was an identical figure, blurry and standing behind the photographer. I walked closer, feeling the atmosphere become heavier. At that time, an old policeman whispered in my ear that since the day this incident was mentioned in the press, up to 4 people who had touched that camera had also disappeared. He told me to stay away if I saw it. I nodded, but my curiosity was aroused. In the evening, I returned to the editorial office. When I entered the editing room, the lights flickered for a while and then went out. In the darkness, I heard a small click, like the sound of a camera taking a picture. I turned around, but there was no one. I turned on the light, my heart pounding, cold sweat running down my back. On the table, the silver camera was lying there. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had never brought it home, but it was right in front of me. The lens was glowing softly, like an eye opening. I moved closer, looking straight at it. In that moment, I felt something on the other side of the lens, as if looking back at me. I picked up the camera, my hands shaking, and turned it on. The screen lit up, showing a photo taken a few seconds ago. In it, I was standing in the middle of the room, and behind me was a tall, blurry figure with black eyes as deep as a bottomless pit. I threw the camera to the ground, but it was not damaged. I was about to run out when the light flashed continuously. The clicking sound rang continuously, as if someone was taking pictures of every step I took. I shouted loudly, but only an echo came back. When the light returned, the room was cold as ice. I looked down at the table, seeing a series of newly printed photos. In each one, I was slowly turning around, as if someone was controlling me in the moment of being photographed. In the last one, I was completely turned around, facing the figure behind me. But what made me shiver was that I couldn't remember ever turning around. I picked up the camera, trying to destroy it, but the lens didn't break, only reflecting my panicked face. Inside the lens, I saw something moving. I put my ear to it, hearing a whispering sound, like hundreds of voices talking at once. They were calling my name. I threw the camera against the wall, but it fell to the floor without a scratch. I knew that I couldn't escape if I stayed here. I took the camera outside, intending to throw it into the river, but on the way, I met a homeless man standing on the sidewalk. He looked at me, his eyes tired, then whispered that I couldn't throw away what had seen me. I asked him what he knew about it, and he just smiled, saying that it had existed for a long time. Each person taking the picture was a soul trapped inside. He pointed at the camera in my hand and said a sentence that made me freeze. "Don't let it take another picture, otherwise you will be next." I ran. The rain started to fall heavily. Each drop of cold water cut into my skin. When I reached the bridge, I raised the camera to throw it, but the lens flashed, A strong light made me cover my eyes. When I opened my eyes, the screen showed me raising my hand to throw it down. A click sounded again. No one saw me after that night. Only a boy found the camera lit up in the rain, the screen showing the only line new person added. Kevin is a third-year media student who has always been fascinated by mysterious stories. When he read the article about the disappearance of reporter Daniel and the rumor of the haunted camera, he was interested. His friends said it was just a sensational news, but Kevin didn't believe it. He wanted to see for himself. One night, while passing by an antique market, he saw a small shop that was still open. The light inside was dim. Old items were stacked on top of each other, and in the corner of the shelf, he saw it. The silver camera was shining, the dim light reflecting off the cold metal body. The shop owner looked at Kevin with a distant gaze and said, "If you want to keep it, remember not to take a picture of it in the mirror." Kevin laughed, thinking he was just saying that to scare him. He bought it without knowing that the warning was true. Back at the dormitory, Kevin excitedly tried to take a few pictures. The light in the room was pale yellow, quiet, with only the sound of wind coming from the window. He took pictures of the desk, the bed, and finally himself in the mirror. The photo appeared strangely beautiful, but when he looked closely, he saw a dark figure standing behind him, reflected in the mirror. He turned around. There was no one. Thinking it was just a lighting problem, he ignored it. That night, he slept soundly until a soft click sounded. Opening his eyes, he saw the camera light up in the darkness. The lens pointed straight at him. Kevin jumped up, his heart pounding, picked up the camera. The screen displayed a photo he had just taken. In it, he was lying on the bed, eyes wide open, and behind him was a man with a blurred face and deep black eyes. He threw the camera on the floor, but it only rolled a few times before stopping. From the lens, a dim light was emitted, like a pair of eyes were watching. That whole night, he did not dare to sleep. The next morning, Kevin told this story to his roommate, Mike. Mike did not believe it, laughed out loud, and said that Kevin must have watched too many horror movies. To tease his friend, he picked up the camera and took a photo. When he looked back, Mike's expression immediately changed. In the photo, Kevin was sitting, and right behind him was a tall, thin figure wearing a dark coat, standing still as a statue. The two looked at each other, their hearts pounding. Mike panicked and deleted the photo, but it reappeared after only a few seconds. Kevin decided to take the camera out of the room and throw it in the trash can behind the dormitory. But at night, when he returned, the camera was neatly placed on the table, shiny, without a trace of dust. He felt panicked, tried to throw it away again, but wherever he threw it, it returned. The clicking sound rang out every time the lights went out, and the next morning, there was always a new photo in his memory. With each photo, the shadow in the photo got closer. Kevin began to have trouble sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that blurry face leaning down, the empty black eyes staring. One night, when he couldn't bear it anymore, he decided to smash the camera. He took a hammer and hit the lens hard. But instead of breaking, the light flashed strongly. The whole room was covered in a painful blue-white light. When the light went out, Kevin was no longer in the room. The next morning, Mike returned to find the room open, the lights still on. On the table, the camera was still on. He trembled as he approached, seeing the screen showing a new photo. In it, Kevin was standing in the middle of the room, his face expressionless, his eyes pitch black, his mouth curled into a twisted smile. Mike screamed, threw the camera down, and ran out of the dormitory. When the police arrived, they found only the camera lying silently on the floor. With no trace of Kevin. The story spread throughout the school. Some people said they saw a blue light flash from Kevin's room that night. Others swore they heard the sound of a camera being taken in the empty hallway. Some curious people turned on the camera to look, but all said that the first photo they saw was themselves, looking into the lens when the dormitory was being cleaned out. The manager found the camera in the locker. He intended to put it away, but when he accidentally touched the power button, the screen lit up. The last image displayed was an empty room with the window open, a pale blue light pouring in, and the text below it read only 2 words: waiting. My name is John, a journalist who has written dozens of articles about supposed supernatural events. I always believed that every phenomenon had a reasonable explanation, that there were no ghosts. But then I heard about the strange camera that made many people disappear. A missing student, a reporter, a professor, and a photographer. Each name disappeared, leaving the same trace, a photo with a blurry figure behind it. I didn't believe it. I decided to investigate myself. I went to the old dormitory where Kevin used to live. His room was locked, but thanks to my acquaintance with the management, I asked permission to go in and take photos for the article. The room was covered in dust, but it still felt like someone had just left. On the table, I saw the silver camera. It looked unusually clean, as if it had just been cleaned. I touched the cold metal body, and at that moment, I felt like someone had gently touched it again. I shivered, but still decided to take it back to the editorial office to check. That night, I sat in the office, only the sound of the clock and the fluorescent lights ticking softly. I put the camera on the table, turned it on. The screen lit up with a soft blue light, and the words starting appeared. There were hundreds of photos in the photo folder. All of them were the faces of different people, each appearing in a different room. In each photo, the shadowy figure behind became clearer. The eyes became darker, almost attracting the gaze. I tried to stay calm, downloaded them all to the computer, intending to analyze them. When I opened the first photo, I felt the light in the room flicker. The wind from the window blew in, cold as if it had a human breath. I zoomed in on the photo and realized the detail that made me stop breathing. In the mirrored corner of the photo, there was me, sitting in this exact position with the camera on the table. I had never appeared in any of the photos, but clearly I was there. I looked around. The room was empty. I took a test shot. There was a click, a light flash. When I reviewed it, I was in the picture, but behind me was a blurry shadow, tall and thin, with an unclear face. I took a deep breath, feeling cold all over. I put the camera down, about to turn it off, but it turned on automatically. The words on the screen made me freeze. "Let me take a picture." I stepped back, my heart pounding. The lights in the room flickered. The click sounded again, even though I didn't touch the camera. A new picture appeared. This time, I was standing near the door. I looked around, but I hadn't moved. I took another step back. The camera clicked again, and in the picture, I was standing close to the window. I started to panic. I threw the camera to the floor, but it was still on, the lens wide open, reflecting my trembling figure. From inside came a whisper, small but clear. "John, look here." I don't know what made me do it. I bent down and looked into the lens. A pair of deep black eyes appeared in them, not mine. I fell back, tripped, and my head hit the edge of the table. In those few seconds, I saw dozens of faces flash by, men, women, students, all with their eyes wide open, as if trapped in the darkness. I heard them whisper the same sentence: "Don't let him take more pictures." I woke up in the hospital, my head wrapped in bandages. The police said I was found unconscious in the office, the lights off, the door locked from the inside. On the table was a camera, the screen displaying a series of new photos. I asked them to show me. In the last one, I was sitting back in my chair, my eyes wide open. Behind me was a figure leaning over, his hand on my shoulder. His face was almost clear, and I realized he was exactly like the man in Richard's photo years ago. I quit my job. From then on, I never dared to use a camera again. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, as I sat in my room, the pale blue light would still flicker on from the corner of the table, and I would hear a faint click, as if someone were taking another picture. The police eventually sealed the camera in the archives, but a few months later, it disappeared. The guard said no one had opened the door, but the next morning, the cabinet was empty. And then, in a small antique shop in the suburbs, a silver camera was found for sale, shiny and unscratched, with a small, handwritten sign beside it, in very good working order. Alex is a freelance animator, known for his hand-drawn horror shorts. He often finds inspiration from ghost stories circulating online. One afternoon, while wandering around the old market looking for props, he came across a small, dusty stall where yellow light shone through a torn cloth. In the middle was a silver camera, shiny as new. The seller was an old man with grey hair, cloudy eyes, and a hoarse voice. He simply said that there was only one left, but he should be careful when using it. Alex laughed, saying that he only needed it as a model. He bought it, and his life began to change from that moment. Back at the studio, Alex placed the camera on the table next to the canvases and models. He took a few pictures to document the new scene. The light in the pictures was strangely sharp, every detail clearer than the naked eye. When he zoomed in on one, he noticed a faint shadow in the corner of the frame, like a figure standing in the corner of the room. He thought it was his shadow, so he didn't pay attention. That night, he stayed up late, editing his sketch. When he looked up, the camera on the table flashed once, even though he didn't touch it. The next day, Alex turned on the camera to check. There was a new photo. It was him, sitting in the room drawing, and behind him, the shadowy man had approached. His face blurred, his eyes deep black. He felt a chill down his spine, but he thought this could be a great opportunity for inspiration. He started sketching the character in that shape, calling it the Watcher every night. He heard the clicking sound again, light and steady like breathing. Every morning, the camera had a new photo, always of him in this very room. But the shadow behind him became clearer and clearer. Gradually, the image appeared in his drawings without him even meaning to. When he reviewed the frames of the animation, he found that there was a character that was not in the original, appearing in the background, looking straight at the viewer. Alex panicked, trying to delete each frame, but each time he reopened the character was closer, his smile longer, his eyes black like ink stains. On the fourth night, he stayed up all night, sitting in front of the camera, determined to videotape to see what was going on. Around midnight, the light suddenly went out, the sound of wind whistling through the crack in the door. A click sounded. The blue light from the lens shone on the wall. When Alex turned the lights back on, the mirror in the room had a long crack, and in the reflection, He saw a pair of eyes that were not his own looking from the other side. He tried to calm down, put the camera in the wooden box, and locked it. But only a few minutes later, the sound of a camera was heard in the room again. He opened the box. The camera was still there, but the screen lit up with the message to complete the last picture. He stepped back, his heart pounding, intending to run out of the room, but his steps were glued to the floor. A whisper echoed in his head, a deep, even, cold male voice. He said that he had created him with his drawings. Now he needed a real body to survive. Alex screamed loudly, throwing the camera against the wall. A blue light flashed. The room darkened. He woke up on the floor, cold sweat pouring down. But in front of him, the mirror was completely shattered. And between the glass shards, there was a silhouette of a person smiling back. That face was himself, the Watcher, the character he created. The next morning, his colleagues came to find Alex because he did not show up for the meeting. They knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. When they entered, the room was dark, only the camera in the middle of the floor. On the screen was a new photo. In it, Alex sat at the drawing table, surrounded by unfinished paintings. But his eyes were completely black. The police came, but could not find Alex. They only confiscated the camera and sealed it. However, when the investigator turned it on to check, there were hundreds of new photos in the memory. All of them animated frames, the Watcher walking out of the darkness, looking straight at the viewer. A month later, a film student found the camera in the school's old prop warehouse and decided to use it to make his graduation film. No one knew that the loop was about to start again, and the Watcher was still smiling and waiting in the darkness. Sarah moved to a small apartment in the suburbs of Chicago after the breakup. It was quiet and bright, enough for her to start a new life. She loved art and decided to buy a camera to take pictures to decorate the living room while walking around the antique market. She saw a silver camera in a glass cabinet. The light shining on the metal body made it look almost alive. The seller said it worked perfectly despite its age. Sarah tried to pick it up, feeling the coldness spread through her fingertips. Still, she bought it, thinking it was just a beautiful antique. The first night in the new apartment, she arranged everything neatly, then put candles, turned on soft music. She took a few test photos. The yellow light reflected through the window frame made the frame very beautiful. But when she reviewed it, she noticed a small detail that made her stop. In the photo of the kitchen corner, there was a faint figure standing next to the refrigerator. She turned on the light to check. The room was empty. She reassured herself that it was her reflection. That night, she put the camera on the table and went to sleep. The clock in the living room ticked softly and regularly. Around midnight, Sarah vaguely heard a small click. She opened her eyes and listened quietly. There was nothing but the sound of the wind outside the window. She turned over and tried to go back to sleep. But the next morning, when she opened the camera, there was a new photo taken at that exact moment. In the photo, she was sleeping, the blanket covering her chest, and behind the bed. The faint figure was still there, standing still, looking straight at her. She panicked, her heart pounding. She immediately deleted the photo and turned off the camera. She locked the door tightly, pulled the curtains, but all day long she still had the feeling of being watched. At night, Sarah decided to try taking another photo to prove to herself that it was just an illusion. She put the camera on the table, facing the hallway, and turned on the timer. After a few hours, when she opened it, the photo showed an empty room, but at the end of the hallway, there was a shadow standing in the dark. His face was obscured. Only his eyes were visible like two floating black dots. She began to tremble, mustering up the courage to throw the camera into the drawer. But when she closed it, she heard a soft whisper, as if someone was saying her name in the darkness. That night, the clicking sound rang out many times. The next morning, dozens of new photos appeared, taken all over the apartment from every angle Sarah had ever placed the camera to. In the photos, she was always in the center of the frame, while the person standing behind her got closer and closer. Sarah began to have trouble sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that face, blurred, deep black eyes, a smile stretching from ear to ear. One night, unable to bear it anymore, she called her best friend Anna to sleep with her. Anna laughed, told Sarah she was too sensitive, then picked up the camera to take a few photos as a souvenir. When she looked back, Anna fell silent. In the photo, both of them appeared, but behind them, reflected in the mirror, there was a third figure, tall and thin, standing right next to them. They deleted the photos, but each time they deleted them, another one appeared. That night, they locked the door and turned off all the lights. Sarah lay listening, her heart pounding, sweat dripping from her forehead. The click sounded again. This time so close it seemed to be right at the head of the bed. Anna held Sarah's hand tightly, and they both looked out into the dark hallway, trembling. No one was there. But then, a blue light from the desk flashed. The camera turned on automatically. The lens swiveled slightly, pointing straight at them. She screamed, throwing the camera hard against the wall. There was a loud crash, then silence. They both gasped. The light in the room flickered and went out. In that brief moment, Sarah saw a tall figure standing at the window, his pale face reflecting the moonlight. When she turned the lights back on, he was gone. The next morning, Anna left, saying she would never return to that apartment. Sarah packed her things, intending to move immediately. But before she left, she heard something coming from the closet, a slight metallic clang. She opened it, and there was the camera, unscratched, shining like new. The screen turned on, showing a new photo. In the photo, the apartment was empty, except for the window being slightly open, and a figure standing outside the frame, looking in. The rain started falling in the afternoon, each heavy drop hitting the window frame, creating a steady, repetitive sound like a heartbeat. Sarah packed her things, planning to leave the next morning. The apartment was now filled with a strange silence. The sound of the wind whistling through the cracks between the rain and the sound of the rain. She sat on the chair, staring at the wooden box where the camera was kept. She tried to throw it away 3 times, but it always came back. Believe it or not, she knew that she could not win against something that did not belong to this world. Night fell. The pale yellow streetlights through the curtains, creating faint streaks of light. Sarah sat silently, trying not to think about anything. The steady sound of the rain made her sleepy. But then, amid the rain, another sound rang out, light but clear. A click. She startled, looked up, and looked around the room. No one was there. She walked over to the box, opened the lid. The camera lay still, but the screen lit up softly, emitting a faint blue light. The words on it made her freeze as she looked at it. She stepped back, her heart pounding. The wind blew through the crack in the door, causing the curtains to flutter, and raindrops splashed onto the floor. The click sounded again and again in rapid succession, like the heartbeat of a living creature. Sarah picked up the camera with trembling hands, her hands cold. When she opened the photo gallery, she saw a series of pictures taken in the past few minutes. In all of them, she was standing in different positions in the room, as if someone had taken a picture of her without her knowing. The last one made her shiver. In the picture, she was looking straight into the lens, a faint smile on her lips, but she didn't remember doing so. Behind her, the window was slightly open, and in the rain, a figure stood still, its black eyes as if all the light had been drained. Sarah threw the camera to the floor, but it bounced back, sliding down, stopping at her feet. The blue light from the screen reflected off her face, illuminating the fear spreading in her eyes. She opened the door, intending to run outside. The rain was pouring in coldly, but the click sounded again, this time from behind her. She turned around and saw the camera rotating its lens, pointing straight at her. The screen flickered, each frame changing continuously, as if recording a video. A soft voice sounded from inside, whispering like wind past Sarah's ear. A familiar voice, low, like heralds, someone she had heard stories about in the past. He said, "The light will bring you back to me." She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the sound of the rain. The black figure outside the window drew closer, lightning flashing, illuminating a pale face with hollow eyes. Sarah stepped back, her hand gripping the camera. She pressed the shutter, the light flashed blindingly, and then all was quiet. When morning came, the rain had not stopped. The neighbor knocked on Sarah's door, but no one answered. When they opened the door, the apartment was empty. Everything was still neat, except for a silver camera lying on the table. The screen displayed a video playing, the sound of rain mixed with the steady clicking sound. In the video, Sarah was standing in the middle of the room, her hair wet, her eyes blank, staring straight into the lens. Behind her, a figure in the rain was moving forward. When the police arrived, they copied the video for investigation. But each time they played it back, the image became more distorted. At the end, Sarah turned her head, looking straight at the viewer, a smile slowly spreading across her face. The police stopped the video there, but the clicking sound continued to echo through the speaker, soft, steady, never stopping. A few weeks later, the camera disappeared from the evidence room. An employee said that the night before, they heard the sound of rain even though it was dry outside. The next morning, in the storage room, there was only a small watermark and a wet handprint on the tabletop. As for the camera, people saw it for sale in a second-hand shop in the old market, shiny as if it had never been wet by the rain. The rain in the city had just stopped when David's group of friends planned a weekend camping trip. There were 5 of them: David, Rachel, Mark, Lucy, and Ben. All of them wanted to leave the suffocation of daily life to find some peace in nature. David brought a silver camera that he bought from a small antique shop near the old town. He boasted that he would use it to capture beautiful moments during the trip. No one knew that it was the camera that had made so many people disappear. That afternoon, they set up a tent by a lake in the middle of the forest. The calm water reflected the red sky. The campfire was burning brightly. The heat made everyone feel comfortable. David took pictures continuously, the clicking sound mixed with laughter. Everyone joked that he should become a professional photographer. But when reviewing the first photos, Rachel realized something strange. In the photo of the group standing by the lake, far away on the other side of the bank, there was a tall, thin figure looking towards them. Everyone confirmed that no one was there when the photo was taken. David thought it was probably the reflection of the tree, so he ignored it. As night fell, everyone gathered around the fire, telling old stories, singing a few songs. The sound of insects echoed in the cold air. Then a click sounded, No one touched the camera, but the camera was still on, automatically turning on the flash. David picked it up and looked at the screen. A new photo had just been taken. In it, the group was sitting around the fire, but the tall figure was now right behind them, close enough to touch. The atmosphere became heavy. Lucy trembled and told David to delete the photo, but as soon as he pressed the button, the camera vibrated, displaying the words, "Cannot be deleted." They began to worry, but tried to reassure each other, saying it was just a technical error. They put out the fire and went into the tent. The wind whistled softly through the canopy, mixed with the sound of water dripping from the branches and leaves, around midnight. Rachel woke up with a start because she heard footsteps outside the tent. She sat up and held her breath, listening. Outside, a small click sounded, followed by steady breathing, very close. She gently pulled the tent zipper open and looked out, a dim blue light shining on her face. The camera was right in front of the tent, the lens pointed straight at her. She screamed, waking everyone up. David ran out, picked up the camera, but couldn't turn it on. When he was about to check again, the screen automatically lit up. A new photo appeared. In it, Rachel was looking out of the tent, and behind her was a long black hand reaching out. The group decided to leave that night. They packed up in panic. When they reached the edge of the forest, Ben realized that Mark was no longer behind. They called out for a long time but got no answer, only the sound of clicking from deep in the forest. When David turned back, he saw the camera in his hand light up, displaying a new photo. In the photo, Mark was standing in the middle of the forest, his face blank, his black eyes as if all the light had been sucked out. They ran out of the forest. When they reached the main road, there were only 4 people left. David threw the camera to the ground and smashed it with a rock, but it was not damaged at all. The screen lit up, showing the words taken. A cold wind swept by, carrying a musty smell. Rachel burst into tears, begging him to throw it away. David threw the camera into the lake. The sound of water echoed. They stood silently watching the waves spread. The next morning, when the police came to check the area due to the missing person report, the lake was calm, without a trace. But in the middle of the water, there was something sparkling, reflecting the sunlight. A rescue worker dived in and retrieved the shiny silver camera, unscratched. The screen still lit up, despite being submerged in water all night. When they turned it on to check, there was only one photo in the memory. The group of 5 stood by the lake, smiling brightly. But if you looked closely at their feet, reflected in the water were 5 other silhouettes, black, with wide, empty eyes. The camera was again missing when it was returned to the police station. A week later, it was found in the trunk of a stranger passing by the campsite, and he was never seen again. Michael is an experienced photographer, living alone in a small apartment in the suburbs of Boston. He used to work for a museum, restoring old photos that had faded with time. One autumn afternoon, while making coffee, he received an unmarked package. Inside were a set of old black and white photos and a shiny silver camera, a classic design. Michael was surprised but curious. He put the camera on the table, planning to check it later. The photos in the collection were all in the same style. The photographer seemed to be a professional, because the lighting and angles were exquisite. But there was something that made Michael uncomfortable. In each photo, behind the main character, there was always a faint dark spot, the shape of a person standing in the distance. He used software to increase the brightness, and something strange happened. The blurry face gradually became clearer. one by one, until he realized it was the same man, appearing in all the photos, even though they were taken at different times. Michael stepped back, looking at the screen. The man was wearing a black coat, long hair, deep black eyes that seemed to have no whites. He quickly saved the file, turned off the camera. The clock on the wall rang regularly, and he felt the air in the room suddenly cool. When he turned back, he saw that the camera on the table was already lit, even though it had no battery. The screen displayed the message to continue shooting. He picked it up cautiously, trying to look through the lens. In the frame, the room looked normal, until he realized there was a person standing in the far corner, right where the light did not reach. He lowered the camera, but the room was empty. He looked back at the lens. The figure was still there. His heart was pounding, his breathing was rapid. He put the camera down, intending to turn off the light and rest. But when he turned his back, the click sounded. Michael turned around. The camera was still, but there was a new photo on the screen. It was himself, standing with his back turned, just as he had been a few seconds before. He shivered and deleted the photo, but it did not disappear. The words below were saved. He tried to calm himself down, telling himself that it was probably an automatic system. He turned off the computer and went to bed, but he could not sleep all night. Around 3 in the morning, the clicking sound rang out again. He turned on the light and looked around the room. Everything was quiet except for the pale blue light from the camera. He approached, his heart pounding. The screen displayed a video of him sleeping. A tall, dark figure stood motionless at the edge of the bed, his head slightly tilted towards him. Michael shook as he turned off the camera, but the video continued to play, and a soft whisper echoed in the room. Almost inhuman. The next morning, he took the camera to the store to check it. The old owner looked at it for a long time and then turned pale. He said he had seen the camera many years ago, and that everyone who touched it had had problems. He advised Michael to throw it away. Michael remained silent, feeling something urging him to keep it. That night, he placed the camera on the table and looked into the lens again. This time, instead of a room, he saw a long, dimly lit hallway with photos he had restored hanging on the walls. At the end of the hallway, the man in black stood there, smiling. Michael was startled, dropping the camera to the floor. A click sounded, the screen still lit. In it was a picture of him. Bending down to pick it up, behind him was a man with a hand on his shoulder. The room darkened. The whispers became more dense, mixed with the clicking sound. The next morning, the police were called because neighbors reported strange noises throughout the night. When they entered the house, Michael had disappeared. On the table was only the camera, the screen showing the message that new photos had been added. A week later, the museum where Michael used to work received a package. Inside was the last photo. In it, Michael was sitting at his desk, his eyes deep black, his smile cold. Next to him was a silver camera. On the wall behind him hung old photos, all of which had the same silhouette standing in the dark. The camera then disappeared. Over the years, it appeared sporadically in auctions, always shiny and working perfectly. No one knew who sent it, but every time someone bought it, a few months later, they disappeared without a trace. Daniel is an avid antique collector. He often attends auctions around the country to hunt for rare items, and this time he noticed something special. The catalogue listed a silver camera that once belonged to photographer Harold King, who was said to have mysteriously disappeared in the last century. When the staff brought the item out, the light shone on the metal body, making it radiate a cold light. as if it had its own soul. Daniel raised the sign to buy it, winning easily because no one else dared to bid. An older man sitting in the back row whispered just enough for him to hear that he shouldn't take it home. That night, Daniel placed the camera on the desk in the collection room. He gently rotated the lens, wiped off the dust, and tried pressing the shutter button. The click sounded, a familiar yet strange sound, as if it were coming from far away. He checked the screen again, only darkness. He tried taking more pictures, but every time, only blurry black patches. When he was about to turn off the camera, the screen lit up with the words, "Saved." He frowned and opened the memory. There were hundreds of photos, all blurry, but if he looked closely, he could make out the silhouette of a person. Each photo had a person standing with their back turned, the same pose, the same scene. But in the last one, the person turned their head, their face blurred. Daniel was a little scared, but still thought it was just a coincidence. He closed the camera and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, a clicking sound came from the collection room. He jumped up, took the flashlight, and walked towards it. The door to the room was slightly open. A pale blue light was shining out. He walked in. The camera was in the middle of the table. The lens was facing the door, as if someone had just placed it. He opened the screen and saw a new photo. In the photo, he was standing in the same pose as now, holding the flashlight. His eyes were surprised. Behind him, a long black hand reached out from the dark corner. He turned around quickly. The light shone into the empty corner of the room. The air was cold. The smell of mold spread. He tried to calm down, turned off the machine, and put it in the locker. The next morning, when he checked it again, it was on the table, shining like new. In the memory, there were 3 new photos of himself sleeping. In the last photo, his face was blurred, his eyes closed, his lips slightly curved in a smile. The following days, things got worse. His assistant, who had also held the machine to clean it, suddenly fell ill. He was delirious, constantly saying that someone was taking pictures of him. Daniel tried to stay calm, but he was starting to panic. He took the machine to an antique equipment expert to have it checked. The old engineer looked over, was silent for a long time, then said that the machine had no circuit or power source, but its lens reflected light as if it was working. He refused to keep it and advised Daniel to destroy it immediately. That night, Daniel took the machine to the empty lot behind the house. He put it down, picked up a hammer, and was about to hit it. But before he could, a blue light flashed, shining directly into his eyes. He stepped back, stunned. When he opened his eyes, a series of images appeared in the air before him, like running slides. In each image, he saw himself, older, thinner, his eyes lifeless. A soft voice rang in his ear, unable to destroy the thing that had taken his picture. He knelt down, frightened. The camera fell to the ground, emitting a deafening click. The screen displayed the last line of text, the last untaken photo. He stepped back, but the blue light spread throughout the space, drawing him into the circle of light. The click rang out once more, then stopped. The next morning, the police found Daniel's house empty. On the table was a silver camera, the screen displaying a single photo. In it, Daniel was standing in the middle of the dirt, surrounded by blue light, smiling quietly, eyes wide open. The camera was sent for examination again, but 3 days later, the investigator disappeared. In his room, all that remained was the camera and a new photograph of him looking straight into the lens. In the bottom corner of the photo, a message appeared. The next round of shooting had begun. Thomas is a paranormal researcher who has worked with the police on many strange cases. He does not believe in ghosts, but believes that all mysteries are hidden in undiscovered physical laws. When he heard about the silver camera that caused a series of disappearances, he immediately asked permission to take it to the lab for analysis. The investigators handed the object back to him with a warning not to turn it on at night. The lab is located in the old basement of the university, where there is only the steady hum of machinery and a faint smell of chemicals. Thomas placed the camera on a steel table, turned on the recording system. He put on gloves and used an energy meter to check. Everything was normal at first, but when he pointed the ultraviolet light at the lens, the device detected weak electric waves oscillating inside. It was as if something was reacting. He frowned and moved closer. The lens suddenly flashed, reflecting his eyes. A chill ran down his spine. He turned on the light more intensely, trying to capture everything. But then, the screen said it was rebooting, even though he hadn't touched it. The first line that appeared said, "See the last photo." Thomas paused, thinking for a moment. Curiosity overcame his fear, and he opened the memory. There were hundreds of photos on the camera. All of them were of people who had held it. He saw the faces of Daniel, Sarah, Kevin, and many others he had read about in the files. They all had the same blank stares, a shadowy shadow behind them. He flipped through each one, his heart beating faster as he felt the light in the room slowly fading, as if the energy was being sucked out. When he reached the last one, he stopped. The image wasn't completely visible, just a black background with the words loading. He waited a few seconds, and then the image began to appear. In the photo was his own lab, with his workbench, his equipment, and the camera in its proper place. But what froze him was the image of a man standing behind him, wearing a black coat, his face obscured. Thomas turned slowly. The room was empty. He turned back to look at the screen. The person in the photo had moved closer, so close that they were almost touching shoulders. He sucked in a breath, feeling a cold breeze brush against the back of his neck. He tried to turn off the camera, but the controls didn't respond. The lights in the room flickered, the clicking sound becoming more and more frequent. The camera took a series of photos, the screen flashing new ones. In each one, the man in the darkness got closer, until in the last one, only his deep black eyes filled the frame. Thomas backed towards the door, tried to open it, but it was locked from the inside. The clicking stopped, replaced by a low voice coming from the speaker, like someone whispering right in his ear. "You opened the door." He turned his head, saw the camera lens pointed directly at him. The blue light was so strong that he had to shield his eyes. When they opened it, the room was dark, with only the sound of faint breathing coming from somewhere. The next morning, colleagues came to look for Thomas, but could not find him. The room was locked, the lights were still on. On the table, the camera lay still, the screen showing the text that a new photo had been added. When they opened it, they saw the last photo. Thomas sat in front of the table, his face calm, his eyes deep black. Behind him was a figure in a black coat with his hand on his shoulder. The camera was transferred to a special storage unit, sealed in a lead cabinet. But a few weeks later, security personnel reported that the surveillance camera in the room was constantly flashing, and there were clicking sounds, even though no one was inside. One night, a blue light burst out, illuminating the entire storage area. When the cabinet was opened, the camera was still there, but there was a new photo in the memory. It captured the entire storage room, and in the middle of the photo was a tall, thin man in a black coat looking straight into the lens, a faint smile on his lips. Since then, every month, the machine's memory automatically added a photo. Always the same room, but the man in the photo gradually moved closer. No one dared to open it anymore, but sometimes, on rainy nights, people still heard the clicking sound echoing from inside the steel cabinet. Regular, gentle, like the breath of something still alive. After Thomas's disappearance, the silver camera was sealed in the Nevada Energy Research Center. They believed that it could be analyzed to understand the supernatural from a scientific perspective. An astronomer named Alexander was chosen to lead the investigation, because he was the only one who did not believe in ghosts, but believed in data. For him, every strange thing had an explanation. When Alexander first saw the camera, he had a strange feeling. Its silver light seemed to absorb the laboratory light, not reflecting, but swallowing it. He requested power to scan the energy around the object, but the devices all reported errors. Even though it was not started, the machine still emitted a slight electromagnetic field. He noted it down, calling it the classic light interference effect. No one in the group dared to touch it, only he. That night, when he was alone in the room, Alexander decided to test it. He put the camera on a stand, pointed the lens out the window where he could see the starry sky. He pressed the shutter. The click echoed as if from nowhere. When he reviewed the photo, it was completely black. He increased the brightness, adjusted the contrast, and gradually saw a shape appear. It was not the starry sky, but thousands of blurry faces staring straight at him, as if the sky was a collection of souls imprisoned in the light. He shivered, his heart pounding. The lights in the room suddenly went out, leaving only the blue light from the camera. The screen lit up, displaying the words "Light Remembered." Alexander tried to unplug the power cord, but all the electrical systems were off. When he turned back, the window reflected a different image. The sky outside was no longer stars, just absolute blackness. He felt the space change. Each step he took echoed abnormally long, as if the room stretched on forever. The camera screen flashed again, showing a new series of images. In it, he himself was standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by hundreds of faceless people, all looking straight into the lens. He stepped back, horrified to see his shadow on the wall fading away. He picked up the camera, tried to turn it off, but it didn't respond. New text appeared. Every image had to be completed. The clicking sound continued. The blue light swept across the space. In that moment, Alexander felt as if he was being pulled out of his body, his mind lost in another space, where light and darkness blended. There, he saw the people who had disappeared before, all looking at him, their faces blank, their eyes like endless mirrors. He screamed, but there was no sound. In the silence, a voice said, "You have seen the last thing the world will ever see." The blue light spread, and then everything went dark. The next morning, the security team found the research room empty. There was no sign of a break-in, everything intact. Except for the camera lying in the middle of the floor, the screen glowing faintly. In memory, there was only one photo, a picture of the entire planet seen from orbit. But instead of the blue of the Earth, the photo was covered in ash gray, and on the surface were millions of small black dots, like souls trapped in silence. Scientists analyzed the photo for weeks, but no one could explain it. When they zoomed in on each dot, they saw that each dot was a human face, genderless, expressionless, just looking straight at the viewer. Then, All the research room data was erased in an unknown accident. When the rescue team arrived, the camera was gone. A few months later, it was found on a high mountain peak where no one could climb. The screen was still on, displaying the words the light will always remember. Since then, on moonless nights, some climbers have claimed to see a blue light flashing between the mountainside, like a click echoing through the wind. No one dared to come near it, for they said it was like an eye taking pictures of the whole world. And if it took enough pictures, there would be no one left to tell the tale.